Shirley here with Sirius Stellus Moon. This is Mercury, our moon day, ascendant 29 degrees Libra, midheaven 1 degree Leo, and the sun with Mercury. Mercury retrograde, meeting the sun moving on to 21 degree Cancer, moon 7 degrees Cancer, moon in its home sign. Venus separating from Ketu at 4 degrees Virgo, and Rahu and Ketu already in 1 degree Pisces and Virgo. Now, midheaven Jupiter. Jupiter is applying to oppose Pluto. And I said that everything that goes through Leo has a Me Too effect, but also this Mercury Cazimi in the background, because Jupiter is ruled by the Sun, and Mercury Cazimi in Cancer. One of the biggest eurekas around, let's say, a region or a country's economy is, how should I say that? Is the business atmosphere in the area successful, bubbly, thriving, or even sober? And when it's not, it's very visible. Countries where people have issues of harassment or weird jokes or sexual boundary violation are countries that either they have the worst GDP or their business culture is just unwanted. Um, Now, of course, when it comes to changing times, this applies for the business of militaries, even within allied nations or allied countries. I can give example from the Kneeling Cult lady that talks about the cultification of the US Army. And it created a situation where within allied nations there is complete and total separation because people are afraid for their daughters. I'm talking about allied nations. Okay, there was a story. Now think about the fact that there would be that Israel would separate American forces, like if it had a country that is accused in crimes against humanity. Now, way before there is an embargo on a country's economy, if we think about, Israel would always talk about, oh, there is, how should I say that, anti-Semitism on every road. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't, but way before we have an embargo on the produce that's manufactured in, let's say, outside the Green Line, there is a business culture that didn't get the message of the Me Too. Now, this is just one example, because of course, upon such thing, people that, how should I say, they're not compatible with being idle. They always seek to do something that's actually meaningful, and such people, anything that interferes with the life energy, that the life energy is not, how should I say, that the water is not clear, they're gonna sense that. And because such people do their own shadow work and are insistent on that, then they're naturally going to look for places where they can do business in a way that actually honors one another. So I see this Jupiter, Leo, and Sun Mercury conjunction as this little update, little eureka, with Jupiter sextiling, applying to sextile Uranus, trine Neptune, opposed Pluto. It's this big aha moment, because Uranus is the life energy, what we call a Kundalini energy. Kundalini energy doesn't work with the atmosphere where the sexuality is not embodied, joyous, lovely, mutually, radically accepting and respectful experience. Now, of course, it how should I say it? It affects business. It's not that people sleep together in business, but the atmosphere. For example, I was at the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce. The atmosphere of expectation for people to have or to seek transactional relations was not working with the, how should I say that, ether level of business when we talk about water dependency as grounds for peace. And again, I'm not talking about sexual harassment on a, not talking about anybody that touched anybody. I'm not talking about, and I'm also not talking about that coming from men alone. But that is something that has affected the ability to manifest a water sharing based economy and trade and peace relations in the Middle East. We see the effect of that in these days. And by the way, Teshuvah has been known to be able to do shadow work. This one is an important shadow work because one would need to address the any affiliation with wealth consolidation that is done by what we call ritual abuse. Okay, the esoterics that is abusive to people. Now, open-heartedly speaking about the effect of that on trade, on business. Before there is an embargo, there is, now of course the Israeli case can be kind of like a study case or a preliminary case where other countries can take note. They might not be Israel, but they might take note to improve upon the business culture as of course people themselves can take a note to do the shadow work or look into those patterns. Um, and this is just because business culture is not Epstein Island. Any expectations that business people, entrepreneurs, military milieu would participate in those type of events is something that is harming global trade. It's harming the collective GDP of countries. It's harming the ability to do business. It's harming the social mobility. It's harming the sense of thriving relations within the nuclear family. Okay, the women that are only stay-at-home moms, even if they have paid labor for, let's say, cleaning the home, their frustration is going to bubble up. And then even when we talk about collegial relationships or even um, local societal relationships, there's a lot of movements towards ecosystemic cities. I see them differently than just not having cars, because we have ecosystemic from submarine to aircraft that can be automated and and be basically a per person form means of transportation. Now, definitely walkable cities. I see the American demand for walkable cities. Every American that visits Europe wants a walkable city. The Dutch streets, those things are amazing. They're also an amazing touristic attraction, a city where one can breathe in. A lot of countries are complaining about having to pay so much money for the military budget or the security budget. One of the greatest alleviation points that are also contributing to this, the ability for an alliance or a military to provide sovereignty. Basically, the job of the security budget is to provide sovereignty on an individual civilian level. Speaking, for example, about the submarine to aircraft per person is one of the things that are growing within the military complex and later permeate the private sector and change our life and add our ability to have a global village, to have people living in their most compatible, let's say, astrocartography location per period, thanks to technology that was developed by that security budget. But the culture has to be supportive of the ability to make business without compromising our relational secure attachment style, our authentic eroticism style that is based on a well-nourished person rather than eroticizing or limerence or addictions that prevent people from having life work satisfaction, being able to save money, access to medicine. Most people don't even know that the shoes that they're wearing, not having full place for their toes, was something that was normal. But this harms the fifth vital sign, which causes various defects from chronic dissatisfaction to literal cancer and neurodegenerative diseases across generations. Mercury ruling over Ketu together with the Sun could signal the um, letting go of certain trade relations due to a Me Too related or a sexual or a UN Security Council 1325 related issue. Right now, Mercury is retrograde, and indeed, yesterday when they were on the degree conjuncting, I was looking at the telic of Security Council 1325, which is basically about honoring the feminine during armed conflict, which is going to have its Saturn return upon both malefics ruling over both outer planets Pluto and Neptune, with Lilith, namely Mars and Saturn, at 29 degrees Taurus, with the Sun joining, and later Mercury joining the decan of spirit and matter, the decan of beta per se, the decan of dead bodies upon dead bodies, when those things are not, when the foundations are not there. And indeed we see an increase of the embargo of produce that is produced in what is considered settlements from Israel by European Union, um, again in connotation to crimes against humanity committed also towards um, countries of the alliance, while the alliance was keeping an elegant treat of the Israeli planes that it escorted back when they went off the radar. Now, of course, when something like this happens, it means that the rest of the countries will also be subjected to prepare for the enforcement of 1325, which is one of the things a lot of people were complaining um, about the relations between Europe and United States when we have Turkey, which is an open, and it's not, how should I say that? Somebody in the ether said Ataturk. Okay, we're thinking about the Ottoman Empire, and that is something that's affecting the Middle East, but it's also affecting Europe, while the countries are busy defending Greenland. Okay, those are open questions. Of course, if they were the location of Ankara for the recent summit um, was by design. Now it prompts the continuation of Security Council to not just women and children, but lower ranks, boys would, uh, because both, by the way, both the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and European countries will have to remediate that to prevent um, let's say Ottoman Empire type of frictions. Particularly, we think about Turkey being a democracy, and the regime um, susceptible to change, or either the regime or the policies. Now, one of the things that contribute to excess friction is indeed everything that I just mentioned. Um, Now, addressing or enforcing Security Council Decision 1325 when it comes to the allied nations in and amongst themselves can contribute to the sovereignty of Europe in the face of United States having a more equitable um, let's just say it's as Meloni says, it's not about assaulting McDonald's. But then if there are sexual boundary violations within McDonald's, that perhaps can be something that one is able to address. Um, Also, of course, by U.S. Now, by the time Mercury is going to go direct, its meeting with the Sun, I believe, will no longer be in Cancer. So what we have with the Sun the Sun 12 from the Sun is seeing the blind spots that we have. For example, we can think about Me Too, or we can think about 1325, we think about girls, we think about women. What we don't think about is the feminization rituals of the boys within, let's say, military training units. This meeting of the Sun and Mercury in the sign of Cancer can also accentuate the emotional effect of communication or trade. Think about the fact where an environment where people are expected to have transactional relations is emotionally unsatisfying to work in. People don't feel appreciated when their life energy or the sexual boundaries are violated. Um, Mercury is also technology, and it calls to address the role of technology and or the cunningness regarding the mind, which means basically mind control. Now, places where there are a lot of tensions, where a person can't easily be themselves, are places where the economy is eroding. And by the way, unfortunately, Israel is one of those places. Speaking very honestly, as a person that experienced the business culture in Israel that does try new things and allow people to have what the Israelis call rosh gadol, or innovation. But seeing this type of atmosphere is, I'm sorry, it looks like the Epsteinis took over so many of the sectors that it's no longer pleasant to do business here. Speaking as a local that spent most of her curriculum vitae within companies that were either Israeli companies or companies that had a branch in Israel. The esoterics that works around violence is harming the business environment, the home environment, the overall life satisfaction in what's supposed to be a high-tech nation. And this is not just pertaining to this region, it's something that we can feel around the world, because we can learn AI, we can adapt, but what we need is for the business culture to adapt and actually be um, possible. Anything going through Leo is accentuating exactly those very tender topics, um, and by the way, that exists even in the healing sectors, in the consultation sectors. This, it's a perception that is so rotten. Very simply put, speaking as one of those children, the teeth of the children do rot because the elders, namely the bosses, namely the people higher up the rank, the people that were supposed to be at the junctures of rehabilitation and consultation, ate unripe fruit. Any access even to something as simple as um, fixing the topic, the issue of a rotten wisdom teeth, is not so accessible, is not so available. People used to fly here to have their medication or medical treatments. Now, if this happens in Israel, then it's probably happening around the world. I can think about the humiliation rituals where we saw German parliament members with poop on them. I can attest that I was tortured and went through similar rituals of humiliations that I never consented to. the access to justice when it comes to litigations, representation. And justice here means recovering the chance for countries to sustain their sovereignty. Okay, a tortured person susceptible not just to mind control, to ritual abuse, and I'm not even talking about extortion. This is affecting governments, policies, resource allocation decisions. It causes economic hitmanship that undermines both the agentic personas. In such environment, it's nearly impossible to do business. And even the people that are sufficed with passive income from trade while working, let's say, a regular job, even those sectors are already permeated, both the intellectual one and the manual work ones. Now, I have nothing against AI. I think that advancing, there probably are so much things that can be done with AI that can make time and space to have a balance between work and rest. It is actually quite a surprise to me that the adjustment period is filled with environment that is not so possible to do business. If I go back to being in high school and the JP Morgan through IBM entrepreneurship course, people came up with ideas that could literally change the world. And what was expected of us is to double the income without people noticing, like enlarging the toothpaste hole. The people that went with JP Morgan later committed suicide in their Saturn return. We know the FTX. The people that didn't went through job sector after job sector of erosion of a business culture that can actually manufacture happy, thriving careers. Um, with a natural inclination to see what does a certain place or sector needs, what are the problems that are there, how can one best solve these problems, what of my skills can I contribute to solving these problems. That was literally exiled. Creating chronic dissatisfaction, lack of appreciation, and eventually downright terror. Marcel de Baran makes it an important point to accentuate this issue. It is Mars on the Mercury of Israel, so Israel was being pointed as a study case, but it's a preliminary study case. It's not the only country suffering with that. For example, the normalization of traveling to Thailand and basically paying money to rape children within Israeli culture would not be possible without having businesses that trade those children in Thailand that could have looked at Israel, for example, to commit a genocide. Okay, those are also things to consider when we talk about international court of law. Naturally, Jupiter accentuates religion. It, just as I open-heartedly stated, the fears around the pretty much Muslim Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman law has served for a lot of the foundations that are still there in Israeli law and British mandate. Um, the world fears Inquisition as well. Those questions and the knowledge of the past, that even the ones that were converted were later massacred. And not only that, they were tortured to do crime, and in that way the Lutheran idea of salvation was no longer dependent on good deeds, because good deeds were impossible when people were literally tortured and mind controlled. This is also why Norwegian jail is one of the most advanced. It doesn't mean that the country doesn't have the remediation to do towards, let's say, 2030, as any country. Just the fact that if I ask a Norwegian man and a Norwegian woman about their country, I get completely different answers, is, to me, was kind of like it was a cultural shock. It's a country that was known basically even by BIPOC people to be places that people felt, the women, let's say, solitary women used to feel more safe in. Now, of course, as in the case with Iceland, when we had basically the seeking refuge within the country, or women seeking refuge within the country, they were susceptible at the borders or at the trajectories to be trafficked, and that created a deterioration also for local women when it comes to women's rights, but also for men that are considered the feminine in the sectors that are violating. All of this is seeing 2030, seeing what we're gonna have there with both malefics on Beta Persei, with Lilith in Taurus ruling over two outer planets. When Uranus, an outer planet, went over Beta Persei, and naturally an outer planet takes time, so it would have Saturn, not Saturn, it would have Mars, except for Saturn, it had Mars, it had Jupiter, it had, like everything was joining up. We had bigger outbreaks in the Ukraine war, which were already getting NATO to state that they have effectively activated, let's say, if not Article 5, then Article 4, and are only thinking when to respond, which now we see a lot of the responses with the infrastructure, but not all of them. Some would say, well, surely we also don't see the entire Russian response. Um, I assume that that is true. Um, Again, the more we are in alignment with Security Council Decision 1325, also on its holistic. Neptune means holistic. As when we see the feminine, we think about the soldiers in lower ranks, the people that are the conquered. One case was, and I'll give a case. Um, yes, watching YouTube Shorts is a source of media that yields that actually yields good things, and this is the story about the Nazi officer. That case, I just don't have the right for this. So, Jurgens, 16, German general who refused to save himself. Basically, he took advantage of the fact that the Cossacks wanted sovereignty from the USSR or from Russia, and basically took them as his legion. But unfortunately, he this legion was still raping and violating and committing war crimes. When the legion was taken by Russia, he went with the legion and not with Germany. Now here we have a simple case where that general, if he would manage to abolish rape and torture at war, he would gain sovereignty. First of all, the Cossacks would gain sovereignty in the face of USSR. Secondly, he would gain sovereignty in the face of those that are the enemies of Germany, but also within the German army, within the Nazi army. Effectively, he could have saved people from persecution, the disabled people, LGBTQ people. Mind you, LGBTQ back then, and a lot of cases today still, were children that were trafficked, and they were made by torture to sleep with everyone. And then some of those were the origin of the eroticism, and some of those were coping mechanisms regarding the eroticism, and some of those were people that were forced gender change, and their only route of visibility was to call for LGBTQ rights. Thank you, Anya Wick, for the latter point, and Douglas McIntyre. Now, Douglas McIntyre, you can watch a Douglas McIntyre by Anneke Lucas. By the way, donating to the podcast of Anneke Lucas can be an amazing astrological charity for Security Council Decision 1325, Saturn returning 2030. People have placements, people have midheavens, 26, 27, 28, 29 degrees Taurus, ascendants, personal planets. But also, I don't know about Anneke Lucas, but also those people that managed to get away from a lot of the facets or a lot of the layers, but haven't shed fully the trafficking affiliated, the trafficking and or the sector of drugs that is associated with trafficking affiliated, then this would be, how should I say that? everything that I said, raising the awareness regarding choice, that is not the choice of the people to be trafficked, and thus is not the choice of the people to be torturers. In fact, they were generated by torture. This point of interference, I believe, can assist people in transmuting if they have any residues of Epstein infiltrated business, Rolodex infiltrated business, whether it's the oil, the banks, and so on, that can assist in shifting the business model. We already had a preliminary case in Israel where a young man pretended to be, and he got men to speak with him. He tried to convince men to film their children, boys and girls, uh, when the father violates the children, and send the footage to him. We understand that such thing is probably a mind control affiliated things, and some of the fathers were persecuted as well, but some of the fathers did not get the full effect of the persecution because that person was basically using mind control on them. So we have a preliminary case in Israel where mind control has been acknowledged as a cause for basically for sexual boundary violations. And this is, I have the news here. I'll try to get more information as per the verdict. And I stress that it's going to be very necessary towards 2030, because the issue is not to say, oh, that person is a rapist and so on and so forth. It's to change from the core what caused this, and to discontinue the phenomena of rape without blaming the victims. Um, Condolences to United States. Senator Graham died of basically a tear in the um, basically the main uh, yeah, they have veins, and hours after returning from Ukraine. Okay, why? It's but a tear from internal tear inside the heart. The veins are it like that's something I would expect from something external, like a stab or a gunshot or something of that sort. What would be a tear? If it would be like anything internal that would cause harming of the tissues, but a tear. Why? After he came back from Ukraine. I'm sorry, this is like, if they wouldn't say what he died from, they wouldn't have that information. Now that we have that information, this information doesn't make sense. and, like I said, now this prompts me to talk about Saturn, Neptune. Neptune is also medicine and surgeries. When we talk about the Epstein infiltration, sexual boundary violation, okay, or even molestation or the unusual dynamic of eroticizing because of deprivation and so on, anything that you play on. Neptune is also drugs, of course, but it causes the lack of sense of self and the harm to the hemispheres. It causes chronic inflammation. I've been dealing with chronic inflammation all my life. And by the way, around the Me Too, I pointed to that instead of saying, oh, that person did that and that and that and that, because I saw how it affects also their constituency and mine. I was speaking to live, not to hunt heads, not even, I wasn't even thinking about, litigation. Like, of course, it affects the ability to work, it affects the ability to save money, it affects the ability to have an income, it affects the ability to have life work satisfaction. Let's say we talk about buying a house or buying a land for the natural herbs that grow. For residents, not even as an investment property. I just noticed that person was also, it's not like there is a happy, thriving person with this congruent sense of self that just goes out and, acts weird to people. And this is what we see as the a lot of the MK, often MK Ultra, the classified issues, the rituals regarding the Epstein infiltration, probably also the dossiers when we talk about the more European, but they have also effect on access to medicine. Cure for cancer, people talk about 26 genes, people talk about the summer artemisia. Wonderful things. That being said, we will always have to go into full remission and sustain it. It's those things that need to be remediated and abolished. Now, naturally, when we talk about surgery, the mind control does not exempt a surgeon, not a military surgeon and not a surgeon, doctor, MD in the operation room. Um, if you ask me how come I haven't fixed my wisdom teeth, I tried. Around the, what was it, the Epstein death or whatnot, I literally, and around COVID, I literally saw a mind controlled dentist. Yeah, it was weird. Um, and this is also where people shutting their mouth is not going to, like, they're going to have to speak to curate the inflammation. Same thing exactly as we had around the Me Too, only it's kind of like now it's got megalithic, for some people metastatic, because, and by the way, I talked about the fact around the Me Too, there were two people, one had cancer in the throat, one had cancer, I think it was in the head. At first she had migraines, and I knew it's related to the hemispheres. And I understood that the, again, it's not about forcing people to speak, but speaking is a part of the curation. It's not just speaking; it's also the change that needs to be in the world, so that there will not, so that the world will not accumulate that inflammation, genetic deterioration. And the biggest satire ever. It's genetic deterioration in where, in those that do the experiments to build what is a superhuman, Superman. Now, in the background, we have the Pluto going from the square to the closing sextile with Aries, which is going to conjoin Neptune just for. People talk about Barbolt's basket, but that closing sextile, entire humanity extinction can absolutely be if we don't tend to those exact things that I'm talking about the entire time. And now think about the fact that they try to normalize those weird behaviors, so it's becoming global. And then on a global level, either people will address that and change, or everybody goes, inflammation is plague. Inflammation. We talk about the lava or magma, but there was the type of volcanic eruption that was gas only. Another shout out. Another shout out is it's gonna be from yesterday. Basically, carbon dioxide emissions, but from a volcano. Tax the volcanoes. I don't know. um, where is it? Caused entire city to fall asleep and not wake up. Now, unfortunately, it also caused basically inflamed skin. So I can't assure that this was like euthanasia for. No, because if people think about weapons of mass destruction, entire city goes to sleep, and that's it. No, no 70 years radiation. With, by the way, why isn't Chernobyl is another YouTube shout out that I need. Um, that bug me in the comments, and I will look for that. But why is Hiroshima and Nagasaki um, not are thriving cities while Chernobyl is still leaking? I just leaked the answer. Now, is Hiroshima and Nagasaki actually safe to live in? Probably not, but they can't say it. In Israel, I finished an entire degree and almost a full one, almost a second one, without learning about Manhattan Project. That I had from Feynman. The teeth of the children do rot, folks. My mouth stinks if I don't if I don't wash it multiple times a day. It, I am those children. That's a testimony there.